The match snapped to life with a small, contemptuous hiss, and every sound at O'Hare's Gate B12 seemed to lean toward the flame. Coffee lids clicked shut, carry-ons thumped to a stop, the PA's sing-song, "Final boarding for Flight 447 to Washington, D.C." wavered in the conditioned air, and the TSA K-9 gave a puzzled woof as smoke licked the corner of the little burgundy book in Brenda Martinez's hand. She held the passport over a metal wastebasket like a teacher dangling a cheat sheet above the trash. "This ghetto trash doesn't belong in first class," she said, loud enough for the line to hear and soft enough to sound practiced. The first page browned, bubbled, and curled. The gold eagle on the cover blistered to a dull bruise. Jordan Cole didn't flinch. He stood straight the way good fathers stand at school concerts, tall, quiet, put together in a navy sport coat with scuffed Oxfords that said "work before style." "That's a federal document," he told her. Voice low and even, as if passing a warning to someone on a dark stair. "Fake document." Brenda shot back, almost cheerful. The flame caught good paper like a small, greedy idea, and in an instant the crowd was filming. Phones rose, lenses widened, mouths rounded. The K-9 handler said, "Sir, ma'am, there's smoke," and Brenda waved him off without taking her eyes off Jordan. "Document disposal," she called. And with a brisk twist of her wrist, she fed the passport deeper into the orange mouth above the metal bin. The smell, plastic lamination, old stamps, fresh insult tugged at memories nobody wanted in an airport. Jordan's phone buzzed at his hip. The screen flashed FAA priority call in stark government font, and he let it ring, hands open at his sides. A teenager near the stanchions lifted her phone higher, eyebrows up, live chat spooling across her screen. "Someone call the FBI." A man muttered, half to his camera, half to his sense of decency. To Jordan, the heat pricked like dry rain. He watched, unblinking, and inside the stillness there was the faintest voice he'd carried from a quieter time. "Hold steady. Collect. Let her burn her own bridge." The overhead sensor fought with the smoke, coughing a small red blink that made a baby fuss. The K-9 leaned harder on its harness and let out a soft yip. "Back up from the counter," the TSA handler said. But nobody did. They were citizens now, deputized by outrage and signal strength. Brenda seemed to swell with it. That combustible attention. "Pick up your boarding pass," she said, flicking a glance at a rectangle of paper near Jordan's left shoe, scuffed now, stamped dirty by a thoughtless heel. "On your knees," she added. Sweet as bad honey. He bent not because she told him to, but because paper is paper. And names are names, and you don't let either go without care. He pinched the corner, stood, dusted it with 2 fingers. And in the pause the flame gave the passport to ash. The kind that floats for a second like bad snow before gravity remembers its work. If you're listening and this moment hits a nerve, if you've ever watched someone's dignity set on fire in public, tap like and drop a comment. What would you have done standing at Gate B12? Sarah Carter, 16. Maybe 17, saw the chat bubble and the moment marry each other and whispered to her camera. "They're burning it. At O'Hare. Gate B12. Her numbers jumped faster than the smoke detector. "Sir," said a uniform with a badge that read Torres. "You can't use that phone." Jordan hadn't moved toward it. He kept his hands visible, an old muscle, memory of safety learned by men who look like him in rooms that don't. Brenda smiled with her teeth. "Fraud is bold these days," she told the line. "They print these things like flyers." A businessman in a gray suit later, his name would be Marcus, shifted his weight, uneasy. "This is America," he told nobody and everybody. "What are we doing?" The PA chimed again, apologetic. "Ladies and gentlemen, Flight 447, final boarding." Someone in pearls murmured, "Good catch." And a veteran in a ball cap whispered, "I thought we were past this." And all of it knitted into a low, electric murmur that decided to become a story. Supervisor Janet Phillips arrived in a rush of perfume and procedure. "Brenda," she said, "what's burning at my gate?" Brenda gestured to the bin without looking. "Counterfeit travel document. Disposal complete." Janet nodded like a judge who enjoyed the gavel. "Sir," she announced to Jordan, "attempting to board with fraudulent documents is a federal offense. You'll wait over there." She pointed to a patch of floor with the certainty of a woman who had never been told she was wrong in public. "The system is down." Brenda added helpfully. We can't verify identity. Jordan looked at the wastebasket. A corner of the passport photo cheekbone, eyebrow glowed dull under a lace of ash. Every generation burns a different kind of passport, he thought, then straightened until his spine said no more. The K9 whined at the smoke again. The handler murmured, easy. Because some things still call for kindness. The crowd throbbed closer, the way people drift toward cliff edges for the view, trusting some unseen handrail between awe and accident. Sarah's phone chirped. The chat screamed in bursts. Oh my God, is this real? Divided by call homeland divided by, she can't do that. Brenda took a pen and stirred the ashes like a child teasing a campfire. Real passports don't combust like that, she declared to the gallery. Foreign fakes burn fast. Everything burns, Jordan said softly. Not to argue but to put a truth on the table where everyone could see it cooling. Officer Torres moved in. Keyed his radio. We have a situation at B12. We have a resolution at B12, Janet corrected, smiling for the camera phones. Evidence has been disposed per protocol. Per which protocol? Marcus asked. Louder now, angling his screen to include the bin, Brenda's hand, Janet's smile, and Jordan's stillness in one shot. The lighted on fire one? A small laugh rolled through the line, brittle with fear and relief. Even cruelty looks thinner when someone names it. Jordan's phone hummed again, the tone rounder, deeper, carrying that government weight that makes even airport air stand up straighter. FAA, emergency line pulsed on the glass. He didn't reach for it. Officer Torres snapped. Suspects don't take calls. Though Jordan had not moved. Though his hands were exactly where 1,000 mothers teach their sons to keep them. That was when the angle of a fluorescent tube and the angle of a man's patience found each other, and the thin chain that held a leather credential wallet peeking from Jordan's messenger bag caught a shard of white light. It flashed a small, clean signal amid smoke and noise. Sir. A woman in a navy blazer said badge reading wash, eyes careful. What's that badge? Brenda laughed, all brittle. Probably part of the costume. Janet sighed like a grandmother at a playground scuffle. We don't have time for theatrics. Jordan looked at the bin, at the phones, at the dog, at the man in the ball cap, at the girl with the brave little live stream, and inside the quiet. He heard his mother's handwriting the way you hear a hymn. Survive. A storm. Dignity. First. Then justice. He put the boarding pass into his breast pocket. Reached for the messenger bag with two slow, visible hands, and drew out the wallet. The gold eagle on the faceplate didn't shout. It simply existed in the light the way sunlight exists on church steps. He laid the credentials next to the warm lip of the wastebasket where the little curls of ash still lifted and fell like a frightened breath. My name is Jordan Cole, he said, and he didn't raise his voice. The room lowered itself to hear him. Chief Inspector. Federal Aviation Administration. Criminal Enforcement Division. The phones stopped moving. Officer Torres's radio forgot its own static. Sarah's comments tripped over themselves, then multiplied. Brenda's pen clattered to the counter with the polite ping of a guilty conscience. Janet blinked twice as if the letters might reshuffle into mercy. That, Brenda started, is a federal credential. Jordan finished for her. And you just destroyed federal property during an active federal investigation. For a heartbeat, the whole gate made the particular sound that happens between the last note of a hymn and the first clap. Then a far-off siren remembered how to wail. The K9 laid its head on its paws and sighed as if relieved to be spared a worse fire. The PA, brave now, tried enthusiasm. Passengers for Flight 447, and then thought better of it, backing away with a nervous tone. A businessman choked on a laugh that became a cough. The veteran in the cap took off the cap. The woman in pearls found her phone and discovered she had no idea what apology looked like in text form. Sarah whispered to her camera. Oh my God. But this time it was chapel soft. Jordan didn't move his files or flash his authority. He simply stood there with the quiet of someone who knows the difference between noise and trusts truth to find a microphone. Smoke thinned. The bin ticked as metal cooled. The crowd, having stumbled into a story, realized they'd just watched it turn. Brenda looked smaller without the flame. Janet took a tiny step back, a tiny step too late. "Officer," Jordan said. And it wasn't a command, just the contour of a fact. "You're going to preserve that wastebasket as evidence." Torres swallowed hard and nodded because there are tones the human body recognizes before the brain gets a vote. Somewhere near Concourse B, the first 3 syllables of U.S. Marshals, cut through on a radio that belonged to someone who didn't smile for phones. Jordan's phone buzzed one more time. He let it count out the rings, and then, without touching it, he lifted his eyes to Brenda, and the silence that settled between them belonged to him. He had carried it here on purpose, through boarding groups and side-eyes, through jokes and searches. Because silence is how you measure the size of a fire after you put it out. The sirens hadn't reached the gate yet when Jordan's mind slipped backward, not far. Just 24 hours. To a different kind of hum, the steady fluorescent buzz of a federal briefing room in Washington, D.C., where the air smelled of coffee and copy paper instead of jet fuel and smoke. Director Monroe stood by the wall map covered in colored pins marking airports under review. "We've had 8 complaints this quarter," he said. "Same pattern. Passengers of color flagged for document verification more than anyone else. We need eyes inside." The director's gaze rested on Jordan, who had been silent as usual, his hands folded around a legal pad. "You're the only one with field credibility and patience for this kind of work." Jordan had smiled without humor. "You mean patience to let it happen?" Monroe nodded. "Patience to watch. Not interfere. We can't prosecute bias without evidence." Evidence, the word had weight. Jordan knew it was heavier than anger, heavier than pride. He signed the undercover order that afternoon, tucking it beside his FAA credential, the same one now glinting under the harsh airport lights. In the DC parking lot he'd stopped for a minute, phone in hand, thumb hovering over his mother's number. He hadn't called. She was in Atlanta and didn't need to know her son was about to pretend helplessness in a country that sometimes mistook it for honesty. He'd driven back to his hotel, ordered reheated meatloaf, and opened the worn photo of her that traveled in his wallet. In it, she was younger, standing on a Selma street corner, holding a sign that said dignity first, then justice. He'd framed that phrase in his heart long before law school taught him how to spell due process. He had looked at the photo, traced her handwriting, and whispered the words like a prayer. At dawn he'd boarded the first leg to Chicago with 1 carry-on, a crisp shirt, and a passport that had traveled through 37 countries without insult. He'd rehearsed calm on the plane the way other men rehearsed lies. Calm was the weapon that worked every time. Now, standing at Gate B12 with ashes cooling beside his shoe, he understood the test had arrived. The present pressed back in the tremor of the crowd, the metallic smell of burnt laminate, the echo of footsteps coming fast from down the concourse. He drew a slow breath and steadied his thoughts. The sirens hushed as airport police approached. Janet Phillips still hovered near the counter, her smile brittle. "We'll have to detain you for questioning," she said. "This isn't the place," Jordan replied quietly. "Oh, it's exactly the place," she snapped. "You caused a disruption." He looked at her the way one might study an insect under glass curiosity without malice. "I didn't light the match," she faltered, eyes flicking to the badge on his wallet, to the thin gold lettering of the FAA crest. For the first time she looked uncertain, and uncertainty in people like her often looked like anger. "You can't just walk in here pretending authority," she said, though the edges of her voice betrayed she already knew it wasn't pretense. "I don't pretend," Jordan said. "I document." The first marshal to reach the gate was a woman, mid-30s, hair tied tight, body language all efficiency. Her nameplate read Santos. She took one look at the ID on the counter and murmured into her radio, confirming presence of Chief Inspector Jordan Cole, FAA Criminal Enforcement. "Copy?" The response crackled back. "Confirmed. Proceed to secure evidence." Santos turned to the crowd, raising her palm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this area is under federal jurisdiction. Please step back." The phones wavered, some lowered, some stayed stubbornly high. The live stream still rolled. 500,000 hearts pulsing on screens worldwide. Jordan caught sight of Sarah Carter, the teenager, her expression caught between triumph and guilt. She looked at him like someone who had seen both the wound and the cure in the same heartbeat. He gave her a nod that said keep recording. In the crowd, Marcus lowered his camera but didn't leave. He whispered to the man beside him. She burned a federal agent's passport. She's done. Brenda stood rigid, the color drained from her face. I didn't know. She muttered. It looked fake. Her hands trembled near the wastebasket as if the ashes might still bite. Jordan's voice softened, not kind, not cruel, just factual. Ignorance isn't an alibi, Miss Martinez. It's a mirror. He picked up a single charred fragment, the ghost of an eagle's wing, and dropped it into an evidence bag Santos handed him. Section 1360. 1, Title 18. He recited, the law rolling off his tongue like scripture. Willful destruction of government property. 10 years. $250,000 fine. Brenda's knees bent slightly, as if law itself carried weight. You can't, she began, but Janet cut her off. Quiet, Brenda. Her voice was trembling too. Chief Inspector. Perhaps we can resolve this privately. Federal crimes don't do private, he said. The marshal's radio clicked again, requesting confirmation of an arrest order. The gate area buzzed like a hive, employees whispering. Passengers unsure if they were witnessing justice or spectacle. Jordan knew it was both. Justice always came dressed as spectacle before it found its dignity. He looked once more at the wastebasket. The last curl of smoke had thinned into nothing. Preserve the scene, he instructed. Santos nodded and taped a bright yellow strip around the bin. The K9 whined. The handler stroked its head. Even the dog seemed to sense the shift in authority. Sir, Marcus ventured, stepping forward. I streamed part of it. You can have the footage. Jordan met his eyes and nodded once. Keep the original, he said. Truth spreads faster when it's shared. Marcus smiled faintly. He would later realize those words sounded like prophecy. Janet, desperate, turned toward him. You have to understand, Chief Inspector, this isn't representative of our airline. Brenda acted alone. Alone? Jordan's tone was cool. You supervised her. You endorsed her disposal protocol. Tell me, Miss Phillips, do you train employees to burn documents instead of verifying them? I didn't think. That's the problem, he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was a blade sharper than outrage. The crowd fell into a listening silence that felt almost reverent. Santos checked her watch. Marshal's incoming in 2 minutes, she murmured. Jordan exhaled slowly, the sound almost lost beneath the PA's nervous repetition of delay announcements. He thought of his mother again, of her voice when he told her he'd joined federal service. Baby. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about documentation. Write it down right. And it stays written. He'd written it now in ashes, in digital proof, in law. A small breeze from the open concourse door lifted a few flecks of burned paper into the air. One landed on his cuff, leaving a gray smudge like an old scar. He brushed it away gently. Mr. Cole, Santos said. The area's secure. Do you wish to press charges immediately or complete the evidence chain first? Complete the chain, he answered. Justice moves best when it walks, not runs. She almost smiled. The first U.S. Marshals entered, boots echoing on tile, their vests black and purposeful. Brenda stared at them as if hoping uniform meant mercy. It didn't. One of them read her rights in the neutral monotone of experience. Janet looked away. Marcus filmed again, unable not to. Sarah wiped her cheeks, still streaming. Jordan stood off to the side, watching law behave exactly as it was meant to, slow, steady, unglamorous. He didn't feel triumphant, just steady. He'd been trained to see the difference between vindication and victory. Vindication belonged to him. Victory would belong to whoever learned from this. The marshal nodded toward him. Sir, we'll escort them for intake. He inclined his head. Thank you. Brenda passed by him in handcuffs, eyes wide and wet. I swear. I didn't mean harm, she whispered. That's the tragedy, he said. Hate rarely knows its name until it hears itself echo. She was led away. Janet followed, flanked by 2 officers, her silence heavier than protest. The crowd began to thin, phones lowering like tired hands after applause. Sarah hesitated near the stanchion. Mr. Chief Inspector? She called. He turned. Thank you for staying calm, she said. If you'd shouted, they'd have said you were dangerous. He studied her for a moment, Seeing her young face, the live courage it took to aim truth at power. "You did your part," he told her. "History needs witnesses." She smiled through tears. "My followers think you're a hero." He shook his head. "I'm a file number in a report. Heroes make the next person braver." Then he gathered his things, the phone still buzzing with unanswered calls. The boarding pass with dirt still smudged on it, and turned toward the window. Outside, the runway shimmered in late morning light, planes lifting smooth as promises. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the fatigue behind the discipline. He closed his eyes, saw the map from the briefing room again, all those pins across the country. Each marking a story like this one waiting to happen or already done. When he opened them, the terminal was quieter. But the silence was heavier, purposeful. He adjusted his tie, picked up the evidence bag with the ashes of his passport, and whispered not to anyone around him but to the memory of his mother's handwriting. "Dignity first. Then justice." The words didn't feel like comfort, they felt like instruction. As he walked away from Gate B12 toward the Federal Liaison Office to file his report, the camera of a cleaning worker caught a last image. A tall black man carrying a transparent bag of gray ash, walking with the measured calm of someone who had just turned humiliation into testimony. The sound of his footsteps blended with the steady hum of engines outside, each beat saying what words could not. Something had burned today, but something brighter had survived. The next morning, Chicago's skyline floated under a wash of gray clouds. And the news had already made its rounds before Jordan reached the Federal Liaison Office inside O'Hare. Every screen in the terminal looped the same footage: Brenda's hand lowering the burning passport, Jordan's calm face, the moment the badge flashed gold. Talk radio hosts debated whether it was bravery or setup. Comment sections fought over what federal investigation really meant. But Jordan didn't read or listen. He was sitting at a long steel desk, typing his report line by line, each keystroke quiet and deliberate. The fluorescent lights hummed above him. A paper cup of coffee cooled untouched at his elbow. "Sir," an agent named Haskins said from the doorway, "Washington wants a debrief by noon." Jordan nodded without looking up. "Tell them I'll send a full statement. And check if the evidence transfer cleared chain of custody." Haskins hesitated. "You're trending, you know." Jordan stopped typing just long enough to exhale. "That's not evidence." Haskins retreated, sensing the wall that always went up when Jordan slipped into work mode. Outside, people gathered at security checkpoints, whispering about the man who had kept his cool, while his identity burned. Someone had started a hashtag, number dignity first. Jordan didn't want it. Didn't need it. He'd spent half his career trying to keep justice off billboards. The quiet kind lasted longer. He scrolled back through his report: incident summary, timestamps, witness statements, FAA references. Title 18 citations. Every detail placed like stones in a foundation. Yet something nagged him. The fire had been too easy, too fast. Brenda hadn't acted alone. Janet's phrase, document disposal, had rolled off her tongue with the ease of policy. That meant there was a system behind it, maybe unofficial, maybe corporate. His job wasn't just punishment, it was pattern recognition. He opened a secure channel and typed a request for internal audit logs from the airline's discrimination complaint database. While the encryption loaded, he glanced at the evidence bag on his desk. The gray ash rested quietly inside, clumped in the corners. The smell had faded, but the idea hadn't. He thought of his mother's voice again: "You can't fix what you don't measure," and resumed typing. By mid-afternoon, the marshals returned with preliminary interviews. Brenda's statement was confused, defensive. Janet's was worse: measured, coached. Both had used the same phrase: protocol for verification disposal. That was enough repetition to be suspicious. Jordan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He called Monroe in D.C. "Director, we've got a deeper problem. They used language that sounds procedural. I think this wasn't a one-off." Monroe's tone carried the fatigue of a man who had seen this cycle too many times. "You're saying they've institutionalized it?" "I'm saying they've practiced it. Find proof, quietly. No media. We can't afford to look like we're playing politics." "Understood." Jordan ended the call and stared out the office window at the taxiway where planes taxied like patient giants. The rain had started, streaking the glass in slow lines. His reflection wavered in it, a man wearing authority like armor, but underneath, still a son of a woman who taught him to keep a steady heart in the face of small cruelties. He packed the evidence bag into a folder and stood. "I'm going to the corporate terminal," he told Haskins. "They'll have the access records." Haskins frowned. "You sure you don't want backup?" "Not yet. Backup makes people nervous. Nervous people hide files." The drive to the corporate wing was short but tense. The rain came harder, drumming on the windshield. Jordan's federal ID got him through the gate and up to the executive floor where glass and steel met with self-importance. The receptionist recognized his name immediately, too immediately. "Miss Hawthorne will see you," she said, voice brittle. Patricia Hawthorne, vice president of operations, had the kind of poise money buys after decades of plausible deniability. She met him in a conference room overlooking the runways. "Chief Inspector Cole," she said smoothly. "What an unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate," he repeated, tasting the word. "That's one word for it." She gestured toward a seat, but he remained standing. "We're conducting an internal review," she said. "Those employees violated protocol." "You mean the protocol for burning passports?" Her eyes flickered. "I assure you, that's not part of company policy. I'd like access to your employee training database and internal communications for the last 12 months, he said. "That will require a warrant." "I already have one." He slid a folded document across the table. She didn't open it. "You know how this looks, Chief Inspector? A public spectacle. A viral video. Accusations of racism. It's damaging." "Only if it's true," he replied. "And that's what we're here to determine." For a moment, her composure cracked. "Fine. You'll have access, but I expect discretion." "Discretion's the only thing that keeps justice from turning into theater," he said. She sighed and keyed a code into her console, unlocking digital access. "Our system logs should be self-explanatory." "Systems never are," he murmured, stepping behind her to read the scrolling data. It was worse than he expected. Dozens of flagged document verification cases over 2 years. 80% involving passengers of color. Notes marked, "Dispose of suspect material." Repeated like a refrain. Jordan took screenshots, stamped them, and emailed them to the FAA server. As he turned to leave, Hawthorne asked quietly, "Do you believe everyone here is guilty?" He paused at the door. "No," he said. "Just the ones who thought silence was loyalty." Outside, the rain had eased into mist. He stood beneath the awning, watching the planes lift into cloud cover, and wondered how many people had been turned away at gates just like B12, carrying less proof, less power, fewer witnesses. The thought sat heavy in his chest. He'd spent his career enforcing rules meant to protect passengers. But rules written without empathy were as dangerous as matches in the wrong hands. Back at the liaison office, Haskins looked up from his monitor. "You were right," he said. "The company's HR director just resigned." The story's spreading again. Jordan dropped the folder on the desk. "Let it. Truth can handle the spotlight for a while." "You think this will change anything?" Haskins asked. Jordan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ash through the plastic bag again. "Change is slow. But it moves." His phone buzzed an email from Monroe with a single line. "Proceed with federal inquiry." He closed his eyes for a second, gathering composure, then opened them to the dull reflection of his own face in the window. "All right?" he said softly. "Let's move." That evening, when the office emptied and the corridors fell silent, he walked the terminal alone. The janitors nodded respectfully, travelers passed without noticing, and the recorded announcements echoed faintly. He stopped near Gate B12, now cordoned off with yellow tape and a sign. "Under federal investigation." Someone had left a single flower there, a white lily, limp but sincere. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, and placed it gently atop the sealed wastebasket inside the evidence enclosure. Then he stood back and watched the petals tremble in the air conditioning. For the first time since yesterday, he allowed himself to feel the exhaustion creeping in, the bone-deep weariness of someone who spends his life translating pain into paperwork. But under the fatigue there was clarity. What happened here wasn't an accident. It was a symptom. Tomorrow he would fly to D.C., present the data, and push for a national audit. He would probably make enemies. He always did. He gathered his coat, glanced once more at the empty gate, and whispered to the quiet terminal, "We can do better." His words dissolved into the hum of distant engines, but somewhere beyond the glass, a plane rose steady into the night, carrying his resolve with it. By the time Jordan's flight touched down in Washington the next morning, the storm that had hovered over Chicago seemed to have followed him east, dragging a curtain of gray across the Capitol skyline. He carried the evidence bag in his briefcase, the faint weight of ash pressing like an unwelcome secret. At the FAA headquarters, the security guard greeted him with a mix of respect and curiosity. Everyone had seen the footage by now. "Morning, Chief," the guard said quietly. "Hell of a thing." Jordan gave a polite nod. "Morning, Sam. Keep your head dry out there." The elevator ride to the upper floor was silent except for the hum of cables and the soft click of his briefcase clasp. When the doors opened, Director Monroe was waiting, coat off, sleeves rolled up, coffee already cold on the conference table. "You look tired," Monroe said. "I've seen worse," Jordan replied. "But this isn't over." Monroe gestured to a seat. "Sit. Tell me everything." For the next hour, Jordan laid it out. The gate incident, the systemic pattern of document disposal, the files from Hawthorne's database, the identical phrasing across multiple cases. Monroe listened without interrupting, tapping a pen against his notebook. When Jordan finished, Monroe leaned back, sighing through his nose. "You just handed us a bomb," he said. "And it's ticking. Then we'd better decide which wire to cut," Jordan said. "We go public. The airline fights back, politicians scream about overreach. We go quiet. It keeps happening." Monroe rubbed his temples. "The secretary wants a briefing. They're under pressure from Congress after the footage. There's talk of hearings." Jordan's jaw tightened. "Good. Let the sunlight in." "You really think sunlight fixes rot that deep?" "No," Jordan said, "but it makes people see the mold." Monroe studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll set it up. You'll testify." That night, back in his hotel room overlooking the Potomac, Jordan couldn't sleep. The city below glowed faintly, a mix of streetlight and fog. On the desk lay the burned passport remains, and his mother's photo. Side by side like evidence of two worlds, one that believed, one that endured. He poured himself coffee he didn't need, stared out at the bridge lights, and thought about Brenda in a holding cell, about Janet waiting for indictment, about the thousands of employees who had seen that video and wondered which side they were on. He also thought about Sarah Carter, the teenager who had streamed everything. Her clip had become the most watched video of the year. In interviews, she had said, "He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just stood there, and somehow that was louder." The words played on loop in his mind. Somewhere inside, the question lingered. How many times would he have to stand silently before something actually changed? The following afternoon, the congressional hearing began. The committee chambers smelled of old carpet and cameras. News crews filled the side aisles, their red lights blinking like impatient eyes. Monroe sat behind him at the long witness table. Across the room, airline lawyers whispered to each other, guarded and defensive. The chairwoman, Representative Linda Graves, struck the gavel once. "We're here to examine allegations of systemic discrimination in airline security and boarding practices," she announced. "Chief Inspector Cole, you may begin." Jordan adjusted the microphone, took a slow breath, and let the calm settle over him. "Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee," he said, voice steady. "The incident at Gate B12 was not an isolated act of prejudice. It was a symptom of an institutional pattern, an unwritten protocol that allowed employees to interpret suspicion through the lens of bias." Murmurs stirred. He continued. "Over the last 2 years, my division has recorded dozens of incidents using the same internal terminology, verification disposal. In every case, passengers of color were subjected to unnecessary scrutiny or denial of service." He placed printed logs on the table, the evidence copied from Hawthorne's files. "The data speaks for itself." One of the airline's attorneys leaned forward. "Chief Inspector, surely you understand that isolated employees make mistakes. The company cannot control every interaction." Jordan looked directly at him. "You can't control bias, but you can refuse to train it." The room fell quiet. Cameras clicked like distant rain. Graves leaned forward. Mr. Cole, what do you recommend? Transparency, he said. Every airline should be required to report identity-based complaints to a federal registry. Every employee trained on civil rights, not just customer service. And when violations occur, punishment should fit the harm, not the PR. Graves nodded slowly. Thank you, Chief Inspector. The airline's representative shifted, uncomfortable. Hawthorne sat a few rows back, her expression unreadable. When the hearing adjourned, reporters swarmed. Jordan answered what he could, sidestepped what he must. It's not about me, he said again and again. It's about process. About law. Yet when the cameras turned off, he felt the weight return. Outside the Capitol, the same drizzle from Chicago hung in the air. Monroe caught up with him under the marble steps. You made waves, he said. Now let's see if they reach the shore. They will, Jordan said, though his tone carried more faith than certainty. That evening, as he walked through the rain toward his hotel, a stranger stopped him, a man in his 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a faded navy jacket. Mr. Cole? The man asked. I saw what happened at that airport. Just wanted to say you did good. My daughter's mixed race. She flies out of O'Hare next week. Maybe she'll have an easier day because of you. Jordan nodded, throat tightening. That's the hope, he said. They shook hands and parted ways, and as he continued down the street, he realized that hope was its own kind of evidence, hard to measure, impossible to fake. Later that night, Monroe called again. We've got a problem, he said. Hawthorne's gone missing. Resigned this morning, disappeared before we could subpoena her. Jordan sat on the edge of his bed, the mattress sagging beneath the news. She's covering something. Her files show a link to a contractor group private security firm that trains airline staff. They wrote the so-called disposal protocol. Jordan felt the fatigue drain away, replaced by that cold, clean focus he knew too well. Send me the name. Aegis Solutions, Monroe said. They've got contracts across 6 major airports. Jordan rubbed a hand over his face. Then the fire at Gate B12 wasn't the spark, it was smoke from a much bigger blaze. You're flying again tomorrow? Monroe asked. Yes. Back to Chicago. That's where it started. Be careful, Cole. Always am. He hung up and sat in the dark for a long time, the city lights glinting off the window like scattered embers. His mother's voice echoed softly. Dignity first, then justice. He whispered back. I'm working on the second part. Outside, thunder rolled over the river, a low growl of warning and promise. The next day he would trace the contract trail, confront the people who had built bias into procedure, and he knew the cost would rise. But for now, in the quiet hum of the hotel room, he let his eyes close. The echo of the hearing still in his ears, a crowd hearing, maybe for the first time, that justice could stand tall without shouting. The plane back to Chicago lifted through a thin veil of morning fog, the engines hummed steady and familiar beneath Jordan's seat. He watched the clouds part beneath the wing and tried to silence the noise in his own mind. Every instinct told him that Aegis Solutions, the private security contractor behind the verification disposal program, wasn't just a vendor. It was the mechanism that had turned suspicion into routine. He sipped stale coffee, opened his tablet, and reread the report Monroe had sent overnight. Internal memos, training manuals, and a pattern of payments linking Aegis to half a dozen airlines. The wording was clinical: rapid identification techniques, document anomaly disposal. But beneath it he heard Brenda's voice telling him to stay down. By the time he landed, his purpose had crystallized. No cameras, no headlines this time. Just truth. The rain had stopped, leaving O'Hare slick and bright under a thin winter Sunday. He drove straight to the old hangar on the service road where Aegis rented its offices. The building was unmarked except for a small blue logo fading on the door. Inside, a receptionist looked up, startled by the badge he flashed. FAA inspection, he said, tone polite but final. I'll need access to your training archives. The woman stammered. You'll need to speak with Mr. Keller, our director. Then let's not waste time. She buzzed him through to a glass-walled conference room that smelled faintly of metal polish and coffee. Keller arrived moments later, tall, silver-haired, The easy confidence of someone used to government contracts and plausible deniability. Chief Inspector Cole, he greeted, hand extended. Quite the media storm you've stirred. Jordan ignored the handshake. You trained airline staff in document handling procedures. I've seen your manuals. Keller smiled thinly. We train for efficiency, not discrimination. You train them to destroy documents without verification, Jordan said. That's obstruction of federal process. Keller's smile didn't falter. Chief. Words like that can ruin reputations. Only if they're untrue. Jordan opened his folder and spread photographs across the table, screenshots from internal emails, highlighted phrases. Visual suspicion, containment by disposal, avoid escalation. Keller's eyes flickered once. Where did you get those? Your company's servers are still connected to the FAA security network, Jordan said. Bad housekeeping. The room fell silent but for the faint hum of an air vent. Keller leaned back, measuring him. You're not here for paperwork, he said finally. You're here for blood. I'm here for accountability. Keller chuckled. A low rasp. You think people want that? They want airports that run on time. Customers who don't complain. You call it bias. I call it control. Jordan's patience thinned. Control doesn't burn passports. Keller spread his hands. You think your little video changes anything? The public forgets. The story dies. In 2 months, they'll be complaining about baggage fees again. Jordan looked at him, calm but unyielding. Then let's make sure this one doesn't die quietly. He tapped his phone, activating the recording app that had been running since he entered. Keller froze. You're wired? No, Jordan said. Just careful. Keller's face hardened. You have no warrant for covert recording. Actually, you're wrong. Jordan reached into his jacket and produced the document signed by a federal judge that morning. Keller read it and paled. You can't possibly think this will hold. I don't think, Jordan said. I verify. He gathered the papers and stood. Keller lunged halfway out of his chair. You'll regret this, he said quietly. People higher than me will bury it. Jordan met his gaze, voice steady as law itself. You can't bury what's already burning. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. He called Monroe from the car. We've got confirmation audio, documents, training trails. Aegis designed the procedure. Monroe's tone was grim. Good work, but brace yourself. They'll lawyer up. Let them, Jordan said. We've got enough to start an injunction. And you? Monroe asked. How are you holding up? Jordan glanced at the rearview mirror, where the terminal's distant silhouette shimmered. Tired, he said. But clean. That afternoon, federal agents raided Aegis headquarters. News spread within hours. For once, Jordan didn't watch. He returned to Gate B12, now reopened. Its carpet replaced, the air cleaner but haunted by memory. He stood near the boarding line, invisible among travelers. A janitor recognized him. You're that man from the video, the janitor said softly. They talk about you like you're some kind of hero. Jordan smiled faintly. Heroes, end stories. I just write reports. Still, the man said, you made people talk. That's something. Maybe it was. As Jordan walked toward the observation windows, his phone buzzed Sarah Carter again, calling from a number tagged with her school's name. Mr. Cole, she said, breathless. They asked me to speak at an assembly about standing up for what's right. I told them about you. He paused, leaning against the cool glass. I hope you told them about yourself, too. You saw what others ignored. I just filmed it. And because you did, justice moved. She laughed softly. You always talk like you're in a movie. No, he said. Movies end. This doesn't. After hanging up, he stayed by the window, watching planes take off. Each one a streak of light cutting through pale sky. Then came a voice behind him, Keller's voice, or maybe just memory. You can't change the system. Jordan whispered to no one. Systems don't change. People do. The next week was chaos, hearings, press conferences, resignations. Keller was indicted for conspiracy and obstruction. Hawthorne turned herself in, striking a deal to testify. Brenda, already in custody, sent a handwritten apology to the FAA. Janet's silence was broken only by her lawyer's statements. Through it all, Jordan worked quietly, feeding reports into databases, testifying when asked, refusing interviews. He understood something most didn't, that justice wasn't a performance, it was a maintenance job. Endless and unglamorous. One night, long after the office lights dimmed, Monroe joined him at his desk. "You ever stop?" he asked. Jordan shrugged. "Not while it's still broken." Monroe handed him an envelope. From the secretary. Promotion's official director of civil rights enforcement. Jordan looked at the paper, then at Monroe. "That title doesn't fix anything." "No," Monroe said. "But it gives you more tools to try." Jordan folded the letter neatly. "Then I'll use them." As Monroe left, the clock on the wall ticked past midnight. The city outside was quiet, the streets gleaming with leftover rain. Jordan leaned back, eyes half closed. Somewhere, his mother's handwriting echoed in his mind. Steady and patient. Dignity first, then justice. He whispered it again, testing its weight. It still held. He rose, gathered his coat, and stepped out into the hall. Tomorrow he would fly again to Dallas, Los Angeles, maybe Atlanta to meet with airline boards, to speak without cameras, to remind them that law wasn't a punishment. It was a promise. As he walked toward the exit, the janitor from earlier called after him. "Hey Chief, they're saying they'll name Gate B12 after you." Jordan paused, smiled faintly, and shook his head. "Don't," he said. "Name it after what should have happened there instead." Then he disappeared into the night, the echo of his footsteps merging with the steady heartbeat of departing planes. The quiet assurance that while fires burn fast, justice when it's real burns slow and steady, bright enough to see the way forward. 3 months later, spring had softened Chicago's wind, and the morning sun spilled across the polished floors of O'Hare like something newly forgiven. Travelers hurried past Gate B12, unaware that the air around it carried history. The plaque on the wall was simple, bronze against marble. Equal treatment under law. Dedicated to those who choose dignity first. Jordan stood in front of it, hands clasped behind his back, reading the words he hadn't written but had lived. The airport noise washed over him, announcements, laughter, the low rumble of rolling luggage, but beneath it all was a strange stillness. The kind that only comes after a long fight. He hadn't been back since the investigation closed. And now that he was here, it felt less like victory, and more like a quiet reckoning. A young reporter approached, microphone poised. "Director Cole, would you say this plaque represents closure?" Jordan smiled faintly. "Closure is for stories that end," he said. "Justice doesn't end. It just needs maintenance." The reporter nodded, slightly embarrassed, then thanked him and moved away. He lingered a little longer. Remembering that morning months ago, the smell of burning paper, the hush that followed, the strange calm he'd carried through the storm. The memory no longer burned. It glowed. Behind him, footsteps echoed. It was Sarah Carter, older by months but carrying the confidence of someone who'd seen the world listen for once. "You came," she said, smiling. "Wouldn't miss it," he replied. She pointed to the plaque. "They quoted you on that line, 'You know dignity first.'" "That wasn't me," he said softly. "That was my mother." "Then she should have been here too." "She is," he said, touching his chest. They stood in companionable silence. Sarah's phone buzzed. Her followers still asked about him, still tagged his name under videos of kindness and protest. "You think it's better now?" she asked. He thought about it. "Better's a slow word," he said. "But maybe we've started using it right." She grinned. "My mom says you sound like her old civics teacher." He chuckled. "Maybe she should have taught me." Sarah glanced around the terminal. "They want me to speak at schools about standing up. I don't really know what to say." "Say what you saw," he told her. "Say that truth doesn't need shouting. It just needs standing." She nodded, tucking his words away like a keepsake. When she left, Jordan walked toward the window overlooking the runways. The morning light turned the tarmac silver. A plane roared into the sky, trailing a promise behind it. He thought about Brenda, now serving her sentence and teaching bias awareness classes in prison. About Janet, who had testified tearfully at her sentencing. admitting the blindness that comes from comfort, about Keller awaiting trial. Unrepentant. His arrogance finally documented in black ink instead of rumor. Hawthorne, stripped of her corporate armor, now volunteered at community mediation workshops. The world hadn't healed, but it had tilted, ever so slightly, toward balance. At the FAA headquarters, his new office felt too large, too clean. Files lined the shelves, cases, audits, letters of complaint. He'd asked for one thing when he accepted the promotion: that his department report directly to the Secretary of Transportation, not through layers of bureaucracy. They agreed. He called it the Civil Rights Enforcement Division, but his staff jokingly called it Cole's Watchtower. It fit. Each morning he arrived early, coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up, combing through data for patterns of bias. He wasn't chasing headlines, he was building a firewall between prejudice and power. Some days the numbers felt endless, a tide of small wrongs, but he believed in what Monroe once told him. Justice isn't about finishing, it's about refusing to quit. One evening, long after everyone had left, Monroe stopped by his office. He was retiring, gray at the temples, eyes tired but kind. "Thought I'd see how the new sheriff's holding up," he said. Jordan gestured to a chair. "I'm still learning how to breathe in quiet rooms." Monroe chuckled. "You always were too serious. You did good, Cole. Better than I did. You gave me the chance," Jordan said. That was enough. Monroe looked at the photo on Jordan's desk, his mother holding the Dignity First sign. "She'd be proud." "I hope so," Jordan said. "Sometimes I think she'd tell me to rest. Other times I think she'd tell me to keep going." "Maybe both," Monroe said, standing. "Take care of yourself, son." When he left, the office felt larger again. Jordan walked to the window, city lights glinting below, and thought about all the people whose stories never made it to court, whose pain never trended. He couldn't save them all, but maybe he could prevent the next one. That was enough for tonight. Weeks later, he flew to Atlanta for a speaking engagement at a law school. He hadn't been back in years. The city smelled like wet magnolia and memory. The auditorium was packed: students, professors, community leaders. When he stepped onto the stage, applause filled the room. He waited for it to fade. "I'm not here to tell you how to be fearless," he began. "I'm here to tell you how to be patient. Fearless people make headlines. Patient people make laws." He told them about Gate B12, not the details, but the lesson. How dignity can stand taller than anger. How justice isn't loud. When he finished, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Cole," she asked, "after everything you've seen, do you still believe in justice?" He smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes. "I believe in people who believe in it," he said. "Justice isn't a destination, it's a direction. As long as we keep walking, we're not lost." That night, after the reception, he visited his mother's old neighborhood. The house was gone, replaced by new apartments. But the church on the corner still stood, paint faded but lights warm. Inside, a janitor was sweeping. Jordan sat in the back pew, the air thick with dust and hymn echoes. He closed his eyes and whispered, "It's done, Mama. Not perfect, but moving." For the first time in years, the silence answered back not with words, but with peace. Back in Chicago, Sarah sent him a short video. It showed students of different colors painting a mural on a school wall. Hands of every shade reaching toward a single flame with the words "Dignity First." Beneath it, she'd written, "For Mr. Cole, who taught us that silence can be power." He watched it twice, then again, until the screen blurred. The next morning he printed a still frame of the mural and pinned it beside his mother's photo. 2 generations, same message. Outside his office window, dawn spilled over the city, like the beginning of something that might last. He took a breath, straightened his tie, and reached for a new file. Another complaint, another name, another beginning. Justice, he thought, wasn't about ending fires, it was about learning how to light lamps. And as he leaned into his work, the hum of the city merged with the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, patient, unafraid. The quiet sound of a man who had turned flame into light and made the world, in some small way, remember its promise.